Viewer discretion is advised.
One, a broadcaster known for composure, Tucker Carlson. The other, a royal turned rebel, Prince Harry. What began as a chance for redemption, still about to become a televised reckoning. The set was elegant but tense. A room built to look like safety, but wired for confrontation. The walls glowed amber, bookshelves framed with shadows, every detail carefully staged to say, conversation, not combat. But the air already carried static. Harry's eyes flicked around the studio, cool, detached, impatient. Tucker, meanwhile, sat perfectly still, posture straight, pen ready, his silence sharper than words. "Your Royal Highness," Tucker began, voice calm and precise. "Thank you for joining us. What made you decide to speak out now?" Harry leaned back, smirking faintly. "Maybe because I wanted to waste an evening doing something beneath me?" Pause. A quiet smile from Tucker, the kind that says, "Noted, not shaken." "Well," he replied evenly, "I appreciate you making the time regardless." Harris tilted his head, tone laced with contempt. "Yes, I'm sure you do." "All right." The warmth in the room dimmed by a degree. The polite smiles hardened into armor. Stiffness and the prince, locked in a duel neither could admit had begun. Tucker pressed on, his tone measured. "You've spoken about wanting privacy, yet here you are again, on camera. How do you reconcile that?" Harry sighed dramatically. "Privacy doesn't mean silence, Tucker. It means control, something your profession doesn't seem to respect." Tucker nodded once. "Fair point. But being a public figure," discharged Harry cut in, sharp. "You're American. You wouldn't understand royalty even if it hit you in the face." The insult hung in the air. Even the lights seemed to buzz louder. Tucker didn't blink. "Perhaps not," he said softly. "But I do understand hypocrisy." Relinquir a flicker of disbelief in Harry's eyes, brief but visible. "Excuse me? You condemn the press for invasion," Tucker continued, "yet you've made millions selling your story, including theirs." Gave a dry laugh. "And you've made millions pretending to care about truth. Look at you, Tucker, the man of the people, dressed like a senator." For the first time, Tucker's pen stopped moving. He looked up, gaze steady. "Do you feel that being misunderstood gives you permission to be dismissive?" Smirk widened. "No, it gives me permission to be honest, something journalists rarely attempt." Settled. Blinds settled. It wasn't the kind of silence that fills space. It was the kind that tightens it. Behind the glass, barely moved. Everyone could feel it. This was no longer an interview, misguided. It was a dissection. Tucker leaned forward slightly. "Let's talk about your book," he said, voice low. "You revealed private conversations, family arguments, even grief. Do you believe that was fair?" Simmons' tooth turned cold. Crimson. "Fair? You Americans love that word. I told my truth. If people can't handle it, that's their problem." Tucker studied him for a long moment. "Sentencing. You know," he said, "I've interviewed presidents, soldiers, even dictators. Most were defensive. But you..." He paused. "You seem proud of being offended." Jang's expression froze, eyes narrowing, jaw tightening. Crimson. "And you seem proud of being condescending." Tucker smiled faintly. "Then I suppose we're even." Betting, but they weren't. Not yet. But came next would tear through the calm like a crack in glass. Rinse just billed. It breathed. Sideline's pause between them was alive, pulsing like a heartbeat that refused to settle. The studio temperature held steady, but the air felt heavier now. The invisible line between civility and conflict had thinned. And Tucker Carlson, master of restraint, was walking it perfectly. Harry, meanwhile, reclined deeper into his chair, the picture of casual defiance. Salmon had grown slower, colder. Salmon, he wasn't answering questions anymore. He was performing dominance. Tucker's tone remained professional. You've spoken about healing, about peace, about escaping the pressure of the crown. Do you think you've actually found that peace? Harry smirked. Peace? I didn't need peace. I needed distance from parasites with microphones. A brief glance toward the camera. The word parasites echoed in the control room like a slap. Tucker didn't flinch. That's a strong term. Harry's eyes gleamed. Is it? The media feeds, twists, drains, and calls it journalism. That's what you do, isn't it? The corners of Tucker's mouth barely shifted. You know, for someone who despises the media, you spend a remarkable amount of time talking to them. Harrison leaned forward. I talk when I choose to, on my terms, not on the terms of vultures with cameras. Tucker raised a brow. And yet, you came here willingly. Harry chuckled, but there was no warmth in it. Well, you're Tucker Carlson. Ambush journalism is practically your brand. That line hit the air like gunpowder. A camera operator exhaled quietly. Someone in the booth mouthed, "Oh no." But Tucker, unshaken, smiled. If you believed that, he said calmly, you wouldn't have accepted the invitation. Harry's face stiffened for the briefest second. Tone turned sharp again. Maybe I came here to see what it's like to be interrogated by America's most overrated commentator. The insult was surgical, meant to cut deep. But Tucker just crossed one leg over the other, hands still, eyes level. And maybe you came here, he replied softly, because deep down, you crave attention from the very machine you claim to despise. Sile words landed like a whisper, but they carried the weight of a verdict. For the first time, Harry faltered. A tiny twitch at the corner of his mouth, a flicker of surprise that he couldn't quite hide. That's ridiculous, he said quickly. You think you know me? Tucker's voice stayed low. No, but you keep showing me who you are. Silence again. Zhang of lights filled the room. Flooding, the crew didn't dare move. Harry straightened in his seat, voice tightening. You think I enjoy this? Sitting here being judged by men who've never lived what I have? I think, Tucker said, you enjoy control, and when you don't have it, you call it cruelty. That stopped Harry cold. Mailbox worked silently before he forced a laugh. You really should try another profession, Tucker. Psychology clearly isn't your strong suit. Tucker's eyes didn't leave his. I don't need a degree, he said. Just memory. You've spent years calling the press toxic while selling your pain to the highest bidder. Harry leaned forward, voice low and venomous. Oh, please. You need people like me. Without us, you'd have no controversy, no clicks, no show. And you, Tucker countered gently, seem to need interviews like this to remind the world you're still relevant. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was surgical. A silence that cut deeper than any insult. Harry's lips curled. You think you're clever. Voice softened to a near whisper. No, just patient. Harry blinked, once, realizing too late that he'd walked into the calmest trap of all. Because Tucker's stillness wasn't weakness. It was dissection. And Harry, unknowingly, was providing the scalpel. The red recording light stayed on. Michelle, but the line between interview and implosion had vanished. And for the first time, Prince Harry looked cornered. No one in the control room dared to speak. Dismissal stayed locked in. Every breath felt like it echoed. The prince sat rigid now, the calm rebellion replaced by something colder, almost brittle. Tucker Carlson, still seated with his pen loosely in hand, looked more like a man conducting an autopsy than an interview. And his subject was unraveling slowly in real time. "Let's talk about responsibility," Tucker began, his voice steady but sharper now, a scalpel, not a hammer. "You've spoken about mental health, about breaking cycles of trauma. Noble ideals. But argue your public confessions created new wounds instead of healing old ones. Dismiss to that." Eyes narrowed. "Critics. You mean vultures with microphones? I don't respond to bottom feeders." Tucker's expression didn't change. "You're speaking to one right now, aren't you?" A visible shift crossed Harry's face. A hesitation, a flicker of uncertainty, before he recovered. "I said what I said." Tucker set his pen down, folding his hands calmly. "This interview was supposed to give you a chance to tell your side. So far, all we've heard are insults." "Maybe your questions deserve them," Harry replied flatly. Tucker's eyes flicked upward, a glint of something close to irritation, but instantly reined back. "Well," he said softly, "then I suppose the audience can decide." Marshall smiled again, but it wasn't confidence anymore. It was armor cracking. The pressed in tighter. Smith studio lights hummed louder. Silenced. The small red dot of the camera blinked like a pulse. Tucker leaned slightly forward, tone deliberate. "Let's talk about California. You've described it as peace, freedom. Do you think the distance from the UK helped you gain perspective?" Harry chuckled dryly. "Perspective? I didn't move for perspective, Tucker. I moved to escape parasites, the kind that wear ties and call themselves journalists." Long pause. Tucker's jaw tensed. He exhaled through his nose. "That's a strong word." Harry tilted his head, enjoying the reaction. "Is it unearned?" Tucker didn't answer. Instead, he watched, calm, unblinking, the way a surgeon studies a wound. "You know," Tucker said, tone now low, measured, almost too calm, "for someone who hates the media, you seem addicted to it." Harry laughed once, short, defensive. "You think this is addiction? No, this is survival." Tucker nodded slowly. "And yet you thrive in the very spotlight you call toxic." Harry's smile faltered. "What are you implying?" "That maybe the attention you despise," Tucker said quietly, "is the same attention you can't live without." The words landed like a pin drop in an empty hall. No sound, no movement, just tension. Harry's lips parted slightly, anger flickering behind restraint. "You think you know me?" "I think you've told the world who you are," Tucker said. "I'm just repeating it back." Dason now felt dangerous, seem heavy. Silence that makes even air, his tone low and biting. "You're twisting everything I say." Tucker met his glare without flinching. "No, I'm quoting it." The two men sat locked in stillness, a portrait of power and control, one trembling, the other immovable. Behind the glass, a producer whispered, "We might need to cut soon." No one moved. No one dared. Precisely because something electric was happening, something raw. Not a debate, a collision of egos. Harry finally broke the silence. "You think this is journalism? It's theater." Turbulent's lips curved slightly. "Then play your part." Harry froze. Room went still again. For the first time, Tucker had taken the upper hand, not through aggression, but through quiet precision. Every word he spoke was deliberate, designed to make silence feel louder than speech. And Harry, Wilson, was starting to hear the echoes. Harry's mask of composure was starting to slip. Crimson breath grew heavier, every sentence sharper, as if words had turned into weapons he couldn't control anymore. The polished royal veneer had cracked, and what leaked through wasn't anger alone. It was insecurity dressed as authority. Tucker Carlson stayed silent for a long moment. He wasn't interrupting. He was listening like a trap. Finally, he said quietly, "You've accused your family of neglect, manipulation, even racism. Do you believe publicizing those wounds healed anything? Or did it just deepen them?" Harry's response came fast, defensive. "You think I caused the damage? You have no idea what I've lived through." Tucker nodded slowly. "I'm sure I don't. But is it possible that sharing your pain for profit?" Shimmer slammed back. "Profit? I didn't do this for money." Tucker's tone stayed measured. "You've made millions from books, interviews, and documentaries. Some would say you've monetized your trauma." Theft wood landed like a trigger. Harry leaned forward, his voice shaking with rage. "And some would say you've monetized division. Don't pretend you're better than me." Tucker didn't blink. "I'm not pretending," he said calmly. "I just don't confuse self-expression with self-promotion." Harry's face hardened. His fingers clenched against his knee. "You really think you can talk down to me because you've got a microphone?" "I think," Tucker said softly, "that everyone watching can see who's talking down to whom." The studio went dead still. Even the hum of equipment seemed to stop. Protection, the royal jaw tightened, but the eyes flickered. He'd lost rhythm, lost control. "You're twisting my words," Harry snapped. "No," Tucker replied evenly. "You're revealing them." Harry stood suddenly, his voice rising, the tension breaking like glass under pressure. "You journalists are all the same. Smug, arrogant, convinced you're moral crusaders while you feed on people's lives." Tucker stayed seated, his calm now cutting deeper than anger ever could. "Pressure," he said quietly, "is keeping composure when someone insults you on camera. You should try it." The sentence froze Harry mid-step. For a moment, he just stared. And that was the moment, the one the camera caught perfectly, when silence became the loudest sound in the room. Harry's voice dropped, cold and trembling. "You think you can humiliate me?" "I don't have to," Tucker said. "You're doing that yourself." Harry pointed at him. "You invited me here just to make a fool of me." Tucker's voice barely rose above a whisper. "No, I invited you to have a conversation. You turned it into a spectacle." The producer in the corner mouthed, "Cut it," but Tucker didn't move. This wasn't over. Not yet. Harry's tone cracked into anger. "You'll regret this. Everyone will see what you did." Tucker stood, finally, slow and deliberate. "If it's an ambush," he said, "it's one you walked into wearing a crown of arrogance." A flash of red burned in Harry's face. Crimson, "You stop," Tucker said, raising a hand. "You've said enough." Cameras were still rolling, but what they captured now wasn't journalism. Tensions, the anatomy, the anatomy of ego collapsing under its own weight. Harry glared, breathing heavy, the image of a man who'd spent a lifetime commanding rooms, now outmatched by stillness. And Tucker? He didn't gloat. He didn't smile. He simply adjusted his cufflinks, straightened his tie, and said quietly, "Thirst, I think that's enough for tonight." The red light blinked off, but the silence stayed. Every crew member knew this wasn't an interview. It was a mirror, and the prince didn't like what he saw. The studio lights dimmed to their soft amber glow. The red recording light faded, but the tension, that invisible electricity, refused to leave. Prince Harry stood motionless, breathing hard, his microphone cable dangling loosely from his hand. The royal mask had fallen completely now. What remained was raw, not anger, but embarrassment disguised as defiance. Tucker Carlson, in contrast, was still as stone. He didn't need to raise his voice. He didn't need to win. He already had. "Cut the feed," the floor manager whispered. But Tucker didn't move. He looked straight at Harry, voice quiet enough that only those near could hear. "You came here to tell your truth," he said. "But truth doesn't need hostility. It needs clarity." Harry's response was half a laugh, half a growl. "Crimson, you wouldn't recognize truth if it hit you in the face." Tucker's eyes narrowed, just slightly. And yet, somehow, I'm the only one not hiding from it. Harry's mouth opened, then closed. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was final. He yanked off his mic, tossed it onto the chair, and muttered, "You're pathetic." Tucker's tone didn't waver. "Perhaps, but I'm not the one walking out." And that was it. No music, no outro. Just the sound of a royal storming off into the quiet hum of a studio gone still. Hours later, sentenced empty. The studio empty. The cameras cooling. The city lights glimmering faintly beyond the glass walls. Tucker stood, alone by the window, his reflection caught against the skyline. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't angry. He looked thoughtful. He picked up his notepad. Questions that would now never be answered. He flipped through the pages, then closed it softly. "To think," he murmured. "Some people mistake control for courage." Behind him, an assistant editor watched the raw footage replay on the monitor. No music, no cuts. Just reality. Unfiltered. When the clip reached the moment Harry walked out, she froze the frame. The look on Tucker's face, calm, firm, human. And the look on Harry's, wounded pride, tangled with disbelief. Whispered, "Do we air this?" Tucker turned. "We air the truth." The next morning, headlines explode across screens. Prince Harry storms out of interview. Carlson versus Royal, the meltdown no one expected. Prognosis meets stillness and loses. Relentless clips flood social media. Analysts call it a masterclass in composure. Commentators call it a royal implosion. Viewers call it uncomfortable honesty. But beneath the noise, something deeper lingers. Because this wasn't about fame, or politics, or the monarchy. Sling was about fragility, hiding behind status. And the one thing the world rarely gets to see? A prince, stripped of his armor. Back in the studio, Tucker watches the replay one last time. He doesn't gloat. He doesn't smirk. He just exhales quietly, eyes fixed on the frozen image of the empty chair. Then, almost to himself, he says, "That's what happens when power meets a mirror." Fade out.